All right, thank you for coming to my talk. I'm Ben Halpern, software developer by trade and one of the co-founders and co-CEO of Dev and now Forem. So first of all, thanks everyone for coming. This is my fourth time attending Codeland, my second time speaking. I wish we could be here together. It's not quite as special, but it's really awesome to see so many familiar faces. I really hope today that I can effectively communicate the answer to this question, what makes Forem special? We've been working on this with all of our time. It's been something we've been working on for years, and we really feel like it's special, and it's good to kind of poke our heads out and try to kind of articulate this to everyone out there. So I also want to try to emphasize that software can be built methodically and that the details matter. The details matter. So the details like how data is stored, what privacy means to the end user, and all of this matters more today than ever. No matter how software is built, it should trend towards it should never trend towards enabling authoritarianism, and there is room for thoughtfulness and kindness each step of the way. So without further ado, let's get into the talk. So Forem is Dev. That is to say that Forem is the generalized version of Dev. So Dev is software we've been building for years. It's where we all gathered today. This talk is hosted at dev.to/codeland. Dev is community software we originally built for the software community. And over the years, we've realized that we really have developed opinions about how community software can be built and should be built. And we've also really developed a lot of values that we should not own this software entirely. We should really distribute this. We should work with our community to build software rather than unilaterally building for the community. And we really feel like we're onto something here. And so that's kind of where we are today. So Dev is special because it brings people together. It's community software. It's inherently special. And we've focused on diversity, on inclusion, on learning, on bringing as many people together as possible. There's some components of centralization that are really important here, but we also really feel like we're letting people sort of be their true selves, live their own life. And, everything we've been doing, we really feel like we're putting a lot of good stuff out there. And if Dev is special and Forem is Dev, then Forem is special. But there's a lot more to it than that. So Forem was seeded by the Practical Dev in 2014 originally, before we had any of these ideas, but we had a lot of thoughts about community, about teaching within the software industry, and a lot of good examples like Code Newbie, which had actually already started about that time. Saran was a major influence on everything we did with the Practical Dev. Dev.to started in 2016, and then later in that year, I met with Jess Lee, one of the co-founders of Dev, who really brought the idea along with us. And then in 2017, we brought Peter Franken, who I'd already been working with, and we really started this whole initiative, Dev Community Inc. We made it open source in 2018. And then in 2019, we started really expanding the team and bringing a lot of creative, really intelligent, really thoughtful individuals. And then in 2020, we announced that we're renaming the underlying software Forem. It stands for Empowering Community. And we really, really, think that is the truth in everything we're doing. So Forem is open source software built for empowerment, built for transparency, built for agency, and built for ownership. We want the source to be open. We want everyone to be able to inspect and scrutinize what we're doing. We want the community to have agency, to have opinions, and to be able to change what we're doing. And we want people other than ourselves to have ownership. We really feel like we want to work with people rather than just being all-consuming. And when we talk about all-consuming software, we really think about data black holes. So there's a lot of tech companies these days valued in the trillions that mine data like oil. And we really think from the bottom of our hearts that there's alternative ways to deliver user experience without being so consuming, so take, and that is really everything we're working towards fundamentally. And then in terms of agency, we really don't want to be like this. We want to be like this. So this is, a pull request to the Forem repo, 115 commits, 155 messages. This is kind of what it takes to get code in sometimes. And we really want to build with the community instead of strictly for it and strictly as consumers of the community's data. So free and open source is not inherently good. There's a lot of bad ways to use this software. There's a lot of, tribalism in open source. There's a lot of reasons people think that open source is absolutely good for absolute reasons. And that's really just not how we think about things at Forem. We have a team of thoughtful, creative folks. And that's really kind of what has helped make Forem special from perspective, from the folks we brought in, from the diversity of the entire community, our team, and really using open source as a tool for good rather than thinking that it's inherently good. So we need operating values in order to sort of put our initiatives forward. So we serve the community, we collaborate, we feel like everyone needs to be welcome and included. We do our work in the open. We have big long-term values and goals, but we really try to tackle the problem at hand, and that we constantly evolve. And evolving to be the Forem project instead of just dev was a big step. Dev itself is a really all-consuming business. There's a lot to do day to day, but we really wanted to see the future and see a model that allowed for more sharing and less consuming. When we announced Forem, everyone mostly agreed with us, which was very validating. People have been pretty excited about this since we announced it. We have done a lot of work since announcing it, and I'm going to share some of that with you today. But really, we're just so excited to let people start creating on Forem, let our incredibly creative developers expand what we can do with really thoughtful community software. So Forem is for empowering community, and if this wasn't very clear, this is kind of where we landed on things with that. So we're really building classical Forem software, but we're really taking a more deliberate, more thoughtful approach, we think. So some of these big ideas that we have is that Forem is not centralized, it's decentralized and distributed. But in order to accomplish that, we really know that the software ultimately has to be useful for the end user. I think there's a lot of conversation about decentralization. It's been happening since the beginning of computing, what the Valhalla of computing, the ultimate goal in some of these decentralized systems. But it doesn't always come to fruition if all you do is talk about it. We know we need to sort of deliver an experience, and that's what dev is. That's what we're constantly doing every day. We're trying to build on good solutions and solve problems at hand rather than being too high-minded and hypothetical about everything. And then how we accomplish this is by sharing the work. We have almost 500 folks who have already contributed to Forem to date. And we feel like as we expand and we become more organized, that's even going to be more and more something we do. So we have a team of about 20 folks engineering on Forem within our organization as the core team right now, but we really feel like we're going to keep expanding in terms of like who is involved in this, for what reasons they're involved, whether they're volunteers, contractors, employees. We really feel like we're expanding this, and it's going to be pretty special in terms of how many people are involved and how many people get a say. And then ultimately, we all get to share the rewards. So we are building dev, and we are going to host, maybe a handful of other forums. I want to talk about a meta forum that we're going to be launching to try to kind of cultivate the conversation. But ultimately, we want your organization to host a forum. We want you to benefit from the ecosystem that we've created with dev, but we also want to create new ecosystems around new shared ideas, passions, and really everything that, a person needs on the internet today. And then we want to do that while actually creating data fragmentation rather than creating data consuming models. So we actually want it to be possible to create a cohesive experience where components of your experience as a user, maybe moving between forums that you're interested in, maybe you go from dev to your knitting forum to your scuba diving forum, we don't want your scuba diving forum to know what programming languages you like, and we don't want your knitting forum to know what scuba sites you've seen. And we really want to treat your individual forum experiences like separate and ultimately a private experience. And we do that by really like not even creating a situation where it's possible for one forum to speak to another. And we really feel like this is a pretty good idea that's gonna make the whole thing ultimately a lot more user-friendly. Within that, I want to introduce the concept of pseudo-centralization, which is somewhat inevitable for end user experience. And I don't want to say that this is going to be something we completely avoid. In fact, we're going to embrace it in certain contexts. So when I talk pseudo-centralization, we look at GitHub, a fully decentralized, or Git is a fully decentralized idea system. GitHub is incredibly centralized. It takes something that's decentralized, puts some important user experience and network effect ideas out there and creates what is essentially a centralized system. Now we want to resist something so centralized. GitHub is maybe much more centralized than what we're looking for. But there's some other models here. We have the World Wide Web, which is hypothetically pretty decentralized, but in practice ends up being pretty centralized, which we also think is not a very good thing, but not something that can be entirely avoided altogether. And then to talk about kind of the idea of fully decentralized systems and where that sort of falls short, a lot of the time we look at, this little message by Coinbase that they prevented over 1,000 customers from sending $280,000 to Twitter hackers, which sort of speaks to this idea that like, is the system really decentralized if Coinbase is here deciding, who gets to send payments? So all that is to say, I just want to sort of talk to the nuance and talk to the realities of how decentralized systems end up getting somewhat centralized. And we want to avoid a lot of this, but we also want to acknowledge and embrace a component of the centralization through tooling and through value add experiences. And that brings us to the idea of this Forem ecosystem. We really hope that there's going to be native Forem browsers or browser extensions. This GIF here is a live working browser extension that we have, getting released at some point in the near future. Hasn't been a real priority, but it's a proof of concept for what Forem experiences can be. So none of these forums know what the other forum is about, but there's a tool that helps you move from one forum to another. We have API integrations, we have directories, marketplaces, search engines, plugins, concepts around identity and authentication. All of these things help tie the system together, and what we hope to build are the enabling nodes within the ecosystem. And then, so getting into some of the technology that enables some of these ideas, Forem is making use of a copyleft license, which means that no one can consume the code without keeping it open source and or publishing changes and making those open source. So I can't, as an organization, take Forem, privatize the code and make changes that might, add extra tracking that the end user might not know about, add extra layers of opacity instead of transparency. And, of course, this is a matter of enforcing the license, but this is a classic license that has been around since the beginning of time in terms of open source. And it's something that we feel like is a core component of what we're doing and why we're doing things. And then to expand on some of the technical stuff, to get into some of the more technical details, we're built on another really important open source idea. We're standing on the shoulders of giants in that we're built on Ruby on Rails, a Ruby framework which has been around since 2005. And without getting into all the details of what makes Ruby on Rails the perfect technical choice, it really is not about the technical choice so much as the ecosystem around Rails. We're really excited about the success of some of the companies, projects that have been building on Rails in the past 15 years, but especially recently, there's been a lot of big success stories, and they're all contributing back into Rails. And a lot of the Rails ecosystem solves similar problems to what we're solving in terms of how it interacts with the database, how the system is portable, conventional, and ultimately, we wish, Ruby on Rails was a little easier on the memory. There's some, issues we have with it, but ultimately it's been a really great choice. And I can't say that, I really thought that through all the way when we created this years ago. Is we were mostly sort of going with tools we knew, but ultimately things worked out really well in this regard. One hallmark of the technical choices we've made over the years is to build in a way that is performant globally. We make heavy use of the new idea of edge caching to serve the community anywhere in the world. In 2017 and 18, I did a talk about how we were so performant that we became sort of the talk of global conversation in some developer circles, including Japan, and we became extremely popular in some areas. And I can't say I'd be giving this talk today if not for some of these moments and how some of these things were enabled by some of our technical choices. So the platform itself is a creative space for expression. And we feel like we have accomplished a lot of that through our choices in terms of leaning into certain ideas like Markdown and liquid template language. As Forem becomes more consumer facing, we may need to build abstractions on top of this. It might not be that everyone wants to write liquid with how they're developing their content, but as compiling targets, it's a pretty interesting space to be, and we're pretty happy about this as building blocks. And it's part of what makes us so excited to build on top of Forem and to release it as a platform that keeps that will keep expanding and growing. In terms of another concept we're trying to enable is the idea that you as an individual might have multiple identities, and it's probably nice when you keep those somewhat separate, even if they're, publicly tied, if you care to do that. But, me, the software developer, kind of gets embarrassed or sheepish if I try to talk about my sports fandom, my Toronto Raptors, NBA champions. And I also feel like I don't know how many people care about, my ideas about like environmental technology, which is something I'm also pretty passionate about. And I'm excited to enable some of this through forums. I feel like I don't necessarily get this on some of the more anonymous web. I certainly don't get this through Twitter, where I have a central identity. And I really think, it's not like this is a radically new idea, but I think this is wonderfully enabled and exactly what we're looking to build with Forem. Alongside everyone else. So Forem is something we plan to host ourselves as an organization. We want to be able to offer a cost-effective, reliable, clean, well-engineered solution in terms of Forem hosting, but we also want to enable everyone to deploy Forem wherever they are, however they want to. And, if we have to compete with another great deployment solution, we really want to do that. We also want to enable you to we want to enable you to launch Forem, in your closet, in your basement, from your own server, if you really want to. We don't really know what the future of cloud, of hosting, of on-prem, of how all that's going to shake out, but we want to ensure flexibility every step of the way. In order to do that, we have new terrain we have to be covering in terms of the system side of things. So we've been thinking about developing an application for all these years, but we're also developing the system, the underlying components, the things that enable us to run anywhere, to be hosted flexibly. And in order to accomplish that, we need reproducibility, security, persistence, portability, which goes, ultimately to the end user if we really want to think about some of these ideas. And then availability. We need consistency. Some of this is already really well enabled by our approach to caching, but for a technical audience, we can't wait to solve some of these problems with you for the next years to come. And sort of we're getting to the end of my discussion, and I really want to emphasize that community on the web is important. It's really what we built the web on collectively. We have really been doing almost nothing but community the whole time. I don't know exactly how much of the traffic on the internet is considered community traffic, but depending on how you define it, I would say a pretty decent majority. And community itself, though, is fractured. It's kind of sometimes a lot more harmful than good. I don't know if that is actually community being established or just things we sort of put a community varnish over, and ultimately is a place to spread, bad ideas and harm. And we really feel like community needs leadership. It does not need authoritarians. It needs personalization, but it does not need surveillance. It needs to be delightful, but it does not need to be addictive. It needs to be explored, but certainly not exploited. It needs to empower rather than consume. And these are things that we want to build into Forem on a day-to-day basis. We just sit around writing a lot of code, but we're writing a lot of code to empower ideas. And we've been working with the hundreds of thousands of developers on dev to hone what we know about the folks in our world. We've been hiring from all over the globe. We've been trying to come up with good ideas, and also to not think that we're gods, and not think that we're gonna be the ultimate solution for the entire problem. But this is something we're working day in and day out to build, and it's been really exciting to see the response, every step of the way. It's hard enough to get your parents to use new software sometimes, or your friends or your cousins. So we know the challenge ahead. Getting people to transition from simple concepts to to new ones that might take some trying. Is a challenge we're up for, and we're really excited to do it along with you. So what's next? We're launching a meta forum for the software developers within our community to help us build Forem. We also have a few early partners we're working with to help launch their forums. There already are some forums launched without our help, which we wouldn't necessarily advise, because we're working on finalizing a lot of our support structure and generalization over the next few weeks. And we have, a timeline to kind of get rolling with as many early partners as we can. But get in touch with us on forem.com. We have a link to a survey if you have an idea, or you want to take part and you're not sure, or any way you just want to get in touch with us. Star the forum repo, watch the repo, and just kind of keep taking part on dev, and say hi to us on Codeland, and just enjoy the rest of the experience. Thanks a lot.